G'day from Lancel in Western Australia. In this video, I'm going to tell you what a number of drivers and team principals rolled up to the Belgian Grand Prix in. And I'm not talking about cars, I'm talking private aircraft. Hang around. So where did most of the drivers come from for the Belgian Grand Prix? Well, a good number came from Nice because they live in Monaco and Nice is the closest airport. Now you might remember earlier this year I did a video called F1 Drivers Private Planes. Well, I can thank Pitrix Plane Spotting who provided much of that vision. It was fascinating. And again, Peter was there in Liège videoing the drivers coming and going. Drivers like Fernando Alonso, who has a sponsorship agreement with EMC Jets. He arrived on Thursday in this Dassault FALCON 2000 LX. This is a heavy jet manufactured in 2007. So would he be able to walk down the aisle? Yes, no problem at all. This has a height of about 1.9 metres, 2.4 metres wide, and is some 8 metres long. Even has a lavatory with a door. And yes, it is Wi-Fi equipped. So Fernando departed Nice at 7:34 UTC, that's 9:34 AM local time, landed at just after 11 AM, and then there's a 44-minute drive to Spa or a 10-minute helicopter journey. I can't tell you which he took, but at some point he would have rolled up at the track in a car. And the reason I'm not doing cars is because the car park is right out of the way, and to spend 4 or 5 hours waiting for drivers up there is not the greatest investment of my time. Hence, we're focusing on the planes that they took. And what would a flight like this typically cost? Well, it just depends on the aircraft in use. I had a quote from one company for between 19 and 23,000 euros for a 1 hour 20 flight on a jet that typically seats 10 to 12 passengers, not dissimilar to this one. Oh, and if you are an F1 fan, I will remind you to head over to my website, kimillman.com. Go to the shop and have a look at the signed prints. A whole host of drivers have prints for sale, all individually numbered, and you get a digital picture of them signing for irrefutable proof of authenticity. And while you're there, have a look at my F1 photo books. Every driver, every race. While Fernando arrived on the Thursday morning when it was yucky, wet and drizzly, Charles Leclerc arrived the night before, so he got the nice fine weather. He arrived on a VistaJet from Nice. They sponsor Ferrari, and as part of that package they would provide charter services to the team. He came in on a Bombardier Global 6000. This jet is bigger than Fernando's. It's got a 15-metre long cabin. It's a little bit higher by about 4 centimetres, and it's an ultra-long-range aircraft. And as you can see, there's a number of staff on board this flight, and they greet their passengers on the tarmac. Who was Charles flying with? He was with his brother Lorenzo and also Antoine, his social media guy. Not sure of the other two. If you know, perhaps leave a comment below. Having landed in Liège, he still has to get to his hotel, which was near the track, which probably meant at that time of day a car transfer. And I can tell you that he was at that hotel playing pool with Alex Albon. And who won? Charles. All of the aircraft I'm going to tell you about today were landing and taking off from Liège Airport. As I said, 44-minute drive from the track or 10 minutes by copter. And this is primarily a freight airport. Busy, but not much in terms of passenger traffic. And I know you can probably see in the background this Qatar plane, but I did a quick search on that, and that is definitely a freight aircraft. Lewis Hamilton flew private on Wednesday evening too. Like Charles, he was in a CESSNA 560 XL CITATION XLS. This is an aircraft that carries 8 people comfortably. It departed Oxford in England at 7:46 p.m. Flight's just under an hour and arrived at 8:44. But interestingly, Lewis's plane was the only one that did not park out on the tarmac and let the passengers out there to walk across. His taxied straight into the hangar where he and his entourage deplaned. Now, if you watched my video earlier on in the year, F1 Drivers Private Jets, you would have learnt that Max Verstappen is the only driver to own his plane. He arrived in his 2009 Dassault Falcon 900 EX. He's owned that for a few years now. It has his logo on the side and his lion logo at the back of the plane. First off that flight was his manager, Raymond Vermeulen, who, if you don't know, used to manage his father, Jos. And of course, Jos was also on that flight. And you can see here that Max is already in his Red Bull gear. He is always in Red Bull kit and is a sponsor's dream. We've discussed that on numerous occasions. And did Max take a helicopter? I think not, because down the bottom of this shot here you can see Cengiz, who does a lot of the ferrying of people around, VIPs, team, staff, drivers, etc. So I imagine he was there to meet the threesome and took them to the track. Coming up, I'll also go through what a couple of the team principals flew in on the weekend. But let's next up go to George Russell. Post-race, he departed on a 2008 CESSNA Citation jet, a CJ2 Plus. This seat 7, and was he heading back to the UK? No, indeed, he was off on holidays. He was heading to Ibiza, where he and Carmen, his girlfriend, caught up with Daniel Ricciardo and his girlfriend Heidi Berger at the Ushuaia Music Festival. You might have seen this pic on George's Instagram page. And having just mentioned Daniel Ricciardo, here he is, along with his manager Blake Friend, a fellow Australian, boarding a 2007 Hawker BEECHCRAFT 390 Premier, a plane that seats 6, although the back row is a little bit squashy. But Daniel did not go direct to Ibiza. Instead, he headed back to Nice. He left at 7:51 p.m, cruised at 41,000 feet, and landed just after 9 p.m. in Nice. And then what's the drive back to Monaco, where he lives? It wouldn't be much more than 20 minutes. And of course, one of the great advantages of flying private is you don't have to get there early to do security. You don't have to check in. And when you get there at the other end, you pretty well grab your bags off the plane and you head straight out. There's very little time to waste. And that's, for a lot of F1 drivers, the most important point, time. Pierre Gasly, you can see him here on a Cessna Citation Latitude on one of the longest flights that day. Not the longest, though. No, there was a much longer flight, and I'll get to that a little bit later on. He left at 8 p.m, arrived in Faro, Portugal at 10:45 p.m. So what's that? 2 3/4 hours on this particular jet. He lives in Milan, so why was he going to Portugal? I gather he was probably going to see Kika, his girlfriend, who is Portuguese. I mentioned the longest flight of the day was not Pierre's. It indeed belonged to Sergio Perez. Where did he go after the race? I can tell you he was on this Bombardier Challenge 604. He headed to Montreal. Now, this is a flight of a little over 8 hours. He was on the ground for 1 hour and 22, and then it was a 5-hour jaunt to Guadalajara, where his family lives. Now, that would be a pricey flight, because I've already mentioned to you that I priced up 1 hour and 20 flight being on a large aircraft, something like 19 to 23,000 euros. This is just under 10 times that duration. And of course, you've got to get a separate set of crew, because a crew can't work 13 hours in a row. I think, I'll stand corrected on that, but my pilot training from years ago suggested that was the case. So I'm suggesting this flight, well, is it 150,000 euros? Is it 200,000? It's certainly a lot of money. But he was heading home for the summer break, and he was heading back to family. So money well spent, perhaps, on Sergio's part. And who pays for these flights? Well, that just depends on the contract. A lot of drivers are given an allowance for travel. And if they choose to go economy, well, they actually put some money in their pocket. If they choose to go private, well, they're going to have to tip in a few dollars out of their wallet to perhaps top that up. Only the teams and the driver will know what the arrangement is. Was the AlphaTauri Honda jet visible in Liège? Yes, it was. I can't tell you who was on it, but I imagine probably Franz Tost, maybe Helmut Marko. It wasn't Christian Horner, because Christian was on board this 2018 Bombardier Challenge 350. This plane was headed back to Oxford. It seats 9 and even has a couch in the back. Very nice. And what about helicopters? Do we know who flew helicopters to and from the track? Well, I can tell you that Lawrence Stroll definitely did. Here he is arriving at Liège Airport in an Augusta Westland AW109. And something that stood out to me after the race on Sunday, I was recording a video at my hotel, DASSAULT, which is right on the track. And I had to stop every 10 or so minutes because helicopters were flying overhead and ruining the audio. I got to say, another helicopter. These helicopters. And I'm almost certain that a lot of the drivers that I've talked about here were in those particular helicopters. Now you know what some of the drivers and team principals flew to the Belgian GP. And come next year, I imagine they'll all be doing pretty much the same thing again. Now, before you go, if you're not a subscriber, and I don't know why you aren't, Could you please become one by hitting the subscribe button? You'll be privy to a whole lot of behind-the-scenes information about Formula One that you won't find anywhere else. Please also like this video and become a member. You'll find my digital images, most of them from Formula One, at prostarpics.com for those signed prints, photo books, wall art and merchandise, and some great new panorama pics. Oh, I should briefly tell you about this one. I shot this in Spa at that race. And if you're in this crowd, you'll be in this picture because the full-size print, which is 5.5 metres wide by 45 centimetres high, comprises 14 separate photographs, painstakingly stitched together. So you can head to my panorama prints page at kimillman.com for them, and for my best images live from the track and during the week, go to Instagram and search at Kim Illman. Thanks for watching and stay passionate. So, cruising at some, I can't even read that. What does that say?